Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sanyavari Praschacha Discipline. I found something very interesting that I want to read and discuss, at least to start with. We'll see how far we get. This is, I believe, an article from BTG, may be 10 or 15 years old, written by a devotee named Archana Siddhi, and she's a god sister, and she's a counselor. I don't know if you call her therapist, but something like that. And she wrote an article about why we criticize, and she gave some very interesting examples that I think be very, very enlightening for us. So I'm going to read it and then we'll discuss. Most of us, traversing the spiritual path, fall somewhere between the pure soul, an example of Yudhishthira Maharaj as a very pure soul, and the envious, an example of Duryodhana. Duryodhana was by nature envious for no good reason. We recognize that we still tend to criticize others, but we want to become free of such behavior. Often devotees ask, how can I stop finding fault with other devotees? But as with any unwanted behavior, it's important to understand what we get out of doing it. Like if you're doing something, and I say, what are you getting out of it? Sometimes your initial reaction will be, well, I'm not getting anything out of it. Like we do this in the forgiveness course. Like, what do you get out of resentment? It's the initial reaction as well. It's something which is not helpful, so the thinking is there's no payoff. And then we go through a whole series of questions, and we find there's so many payoffs. Like we come up with 20 or 30 payoffs. And what are we getting by resentment? And my point is, if you weren't getting anything, you probably wouldn't be doing it. Right? Why would you waste time if there's no benefit? And so I like this question. I think it's a very good question. If I'm criticizing, what am I getting from it? What's the payoff? And we discussed some of the payoffs in the last few days, but there's always a payoff for everything we do. Unless it's just habitual addiction that we can't control. But generally, we do things because we're going to get some payoff. If we fail to address the step of the payoff, our mind will undoubtedly sabotage our efforts to give up criticism. Often the secondary gain will be easy to see. In other words, she's saying, if you don't recognize what you're getting from doing it, you try to pretend either you're not getting anything, or you're justified, or you just don't know what you're getting, it's going to be difficult to give up the desire to criticize. And she gives some examples. These are some motivations. Some of this we discussed, but she gives some interesting anecdotes from her experience as a counselor, and it's really amazing to see some of the subtle reasons that we criticize, that maybe we wouldn't normally be aware of, and it would take some time to understand. So she gives some really good examples. So some common motivations for criticism: superiority, we discussed that. Getting back at someone who's hurt us, we didn't discuss that. Asserting our position or belief as the best or only way, like I don't like what you're doing because I think the way I do it is the best way or the only way, so that I criticize you. And generally, criticism comes from a position of somewhat superiority, because I'm criticizing you, which means I'm judging you, and I'm judging you by standards probably often that I've created. Oh, this is how I do it. And you don't do it how I do it, So that makes you wrong. Because, of course, the way I do it is perfect. Right? Isn't it? I do it the right way. If it wasn't the right way, I wouldn't do it. So now I'm judging you based on my standards or my behavior. Avoiding scrutiny of our own shortcomings. So this is we had discussed this, but it's worth mentioning again. If I can shift the blame to you, then I don't have to deal with my own shortcomings. So if you ever do that, it would be helpful for you to think, okay, am I shifting blame because there's something I'm trying to hide for myself or something I don't want to admit? Have you ever done that? Never, right?
No, but I was thinking, because one thing is when this happens with someone, when you have to live with or work with, and when someone that is just goes away, you take and go, doesn't matter. But when it's the whole day, or you are living or working with someone that have some values that for you, how your parents grow you, what you learn, what you read, you're just trying to, this is good for me, and the other people all the whole time is there, but there is other part of you that like something to be with that person, and it's like everything is connect like this, and somebody press the right button and say, wow, it's like difficult.
Yeah. But not impossible, just difficult. Well, what's difficult? What's difficult is not accepting them the way they are. That's the difficult part. And then the ramification of that is even more difficult. But that's the point she was making. Like you said, you're raised in a certain way, so you think that's normal. So if people do it differently, you think something's wrong with them. But they might be thinking that about you. Right? It's possible.
Yeah.
So it's an egocentric position to think, well, whatever I've learned, my values and my culture is superior to yours. Isn't it? But it's something we all face, and it's normal, but it's wrong. We were talking this morning, we went to the Jagai Madai Ghat on the morning walk, and there was a temple there. So we spent a little time in the temple, and this Jagai Madai Ghat, it's really the place of forgiveness, because Jagai and Madai built this god asking, and they would ask people to forgive them for all the bad things they did to them. The Jagai and Madai were terrorizing this whole area. And so we were talking about how difficult it is to be kind to someone who's unkind to you. Almost impossible, but we're supposed to be. As a devotee, that's what a devotee is supposed to be. And we're trying to be devotees, so we're supposed to be learning this. And we were discussing how it's almost impossible. Right? If someone's harming you, it's almost impossible to well-wish you. But that's what the Shastra says. So in a similar way, I think, when we have our values and someone else has their values and culture, which is much different, it's very difficult for us to appreciate. We tend to think, oh, they're wrong or they're inferior. And it's just another challenge. It's a challenge of life we all have to face. And these challenges are good, because you're either going to grow or get destroyed. Right? I mean, we all think we're nice guys, we're nice ladies. That's just naturally how we all think, right? But sometimes it gets tested and you realize you're not so nice, right? You ever do something and say, I can't believe I did that. I thought I was nicer than that. You get so mad and you're just like, chew somebody out, yell at them, scream at them, and they're like, okay, I'm sorry, and you just keep going, and then you walk away and say, I can't believe I did that. So these situations are good because they reveal who we are, that we can't pretend. Like we're always pretending, we're better than we are. And then you get in the real life situations and you see who you are, so that's good. And then you stand back and go, oh, look how prejudiced I am, right? Have you ever seen this experiment? It's very, very sick. It's an experiment on prejudice, and they have two dolls, a white doll and a colored meaning a black person, African person. And they're asking people, what doll do you like better? And everybody's choosing the white doll. But the interesting thing is the black kids choose the white doll also. And they ask the black kids, why do you like the white doll better than the black doll? And they'll say, because he's white. So they've been even programmed to think black people are inferior. So we have all these prejudices programmed into us. And then the people we're prejudiced against show up. And now it's like friction. That's good. Because now you can see where you're at. And you can realize, okay, I'm not as great as I thought I was. And I have more work to do. And so I think it's good. If you can tolerate it. Now, I have a nice story for you. There was a devotee who was being harassed by his boss. And at some point, he made peace with it. So I don't know how, but he did. He said, I just saw through it, or I understood the pressure he was under, or whatever. He made peace with it. And he said, after he made peace with it, the boss was put into another department. And so we were talking about how sometimes when you need to learn something, Krishna puts somebody in your life to teach you something. And until you learn it, your boss sticks around, and then when you learn it, the boss gets transferred to another department. It works like that. So sometimes when there's conflict and things aren't working out well, we can ask ourselves, okay, well, did Krishna send this for me for a reason? And has he sent this before and I haven't learned, so it keeps coming? I think for many of us that's true. The repeated thing keeps happening because we haven't learned yet how to deal with it. So Krishna's helping us. He's showing us. I have this great story. Should I tell you? This is a story, it's a forgiveness story. And so, the whole reason that I started teaching about forgiveness is because I had an issue that I'd overcome. And in overcoming it, I realized something, but it was 18 years later that I realized it. And I realized that when I was hurt by this person was also hurt. He was much further down than me because of his own choice. And rather than be resentful, I should have been compassionate, but I wasn't. Because when you're resentful, there's no room for compassion, and when you're compassionate, there's no room for resentment. Did you know that? They can't fit in the same jar. They can't live together. You get one or the other, but they don't work together. So there was a devotee, and he had some difficulty, and he left his position, and he was in a very big position. And by leaving his position, so many things fell apart. So I was very upset for what he did, because it had ramifications on my life for many years. And after I taught forgiveness, this was about 18 years later, I realized that I was very insensitive to his suffering because I was focused on my suffering. So I didn't really care about him, but he was facing a difficult situation, and him dropping out of his leadership position, I finally saw as probably a good decision, but at the time I didn't. At the time, I was too angry. So, in the Course, we ask the devotees to take the part of Krishna. And their partner takes you. So, if he were your partner, he was you, and you were Krishna, and you would talk to him. And so, as Krishna, you tell yourself why I put you in the situation, what I wanted you to learn. And so, when I played that role, then Krishna said to me, I put you in that situation so you could learn compassion, but you failed. You just got mad at him. And he was going through difficulty, but that difficulty he was going through hurt you, so it turned into resentment rather than compassion. And so 18 years later, I got the lesson that this person was trying to teach me 18 years ago that I didn't get because I was angry. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of times we don't get the lesson because we're too angry. And it's only when we calm down and see things more clearly or differently that we start to get the lesson. And usually, until that happens, we're blaming the person for the problem. We're blaming the person for how we feel. It's your fault that I'm angry at you. Now, we do this all the time, but when you talk about it, it sounds really stupid, doesn't it? Like, he's responsible for my anger? I don't think so. We have no contract. It wasn't part of our job description. But he makes me angry. Or he makes me upset. But who's responsible for my anger? Obviously I am. But when I don't want to admit that, I can just say it's his fault. And we do that all the time. And then what happens when we do that? We can't see our position, our part in it, and then we can't correct it because you can't correct something that you don't acknowledge. And that's why we were saying 2 days ago, one of the biggest breakthroughs you have as a devotee is just to acknowledge a problem and to want to do something about it. Because once you do that, it's pretty much now you're going to be able to work on it. But until you acknowledge the problem and have a desire to work on it, you can have read Bhagavatam 1,000,000 times, but you have to acknowledge the problem, because how can you work on it if you don't acknowledge it? And even if you acknowledge it and you don't care, then you don't care, so you don't work on it. Does that make sense? So, acknowledging, okay, this person irritates me. But as they say, in every bad relationship you've ever had in your life, there's one common factor. Who knows the common factor in every bad relationship you ever had? You. We're the common factor. Duh. But we don't want to admit that, right? In every bad relationship we ever had, the common factor is that other person is an idiot, or other person was an idiot. That's how we think, right? The common factor was they were wrong, or stupid, or obnoxious. Nothing about us. This beautiful story. This one devotee was asked, I was in the seminar, to tell me about how she was a victim. So she said her husband, she and her husband sold their home. After they sold their home, the husband took all the money and ran away. And she was left without a home and without any money. It was a joint bank account. And so she explained how she was victimized, how they sold the house, how they were making plans. And all of a sudden, house is sold, money's out of the bank, he's gone. And then the facilitator of the seminar changed it up and said, now you have to say how it was your fault that happened, which is really difficult once you've explained how you're a victim, right? Now you have to explain how it's your fault. And guess what she said? First she had to think, what do you think she said to take responsibility?
She married.
What?
She married him?
Yeah, it was her choice to marry him. So if someone mistreats you, and you've agreed to be in a relationship, at least that much responsibility you have to take. Her conclusion was, she was talking it out, and she became clear, and her conclusion was, I should have never married him in the first place. It was my fault. So that's a responsibility. So every bad relationship we were there, we had something to do with it. At least we made the choice to be in the relationship, or we allow. Sometimes the person is abusing or cheating, or whatever, and we allow it, or we don't notice it, or we overlook it. So then, so you're blaming the person for abusing you, but you're right there as a target of abuse. So you have to take somewhat responsibility. Anyway, the point is, when these situations come about, at least think, like, what can I learn, or what did I have to do with this? Now here's another thing, which is also, this is very hard to admit for many people. Let's take your situation. Let's say someone in your company that you're working with is disturbing you, or inconsiderate, or very critical, or whatever. But there's another question. Have I done anything to trigger them, and therefore are they actually responding to what I did rather than initiating that kind of behavior? Normally we don't think that way, right? We always think the person who's mistreating is initiating that behavior, isn't it? Isn't that normally how we think? It's their fault they initiated behavior. But what about the possibility that I did something and they're responding to what I did? It's a definite possibility, right? We don't normally think that way because we're always trying to shift responsibility from ourselves to someone else. Right? It's just a really bad way to live because you can't get very far that way. So there's a purport. We'll get to your question. I just gotta keep thinking. There's a purport in the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says that Krishna wants to see how painstaking a devotee is. He said, like devotional service and easygoing life, it doesn't work. It's like you need some austerity, you need some challenge. So Krishna likes it when you're tolerant in those situations. He wants to see. Okay, you go to the office or whatever, your mother-in-law bothers you, whatever the situation is. And now Krishna's looking at you. Okay, you're trying to be a devotee, you tell people you're a devotee. Okay, so let's see what kind of devotee you are in this situation. Because it's easy to be a devotee in a good situation, right? Go to the temple, there's kirtan. Wow, look at this guy, he dances like he's crazy. He must be a great devotee. But what does he do outside the temple? That's another thing. So Krishna wants to see, when things get tough, what do you do? So now this lady in the office is upsetting you, and Krishna's looking and he's thinking, okay, what's he going to do now? And maybe you're very tolerant and very humble, and Krishna says, yes, he's my devotee. And maybe you're not, and Krishna says, he blew it. He got angry. Not good. They had a show when I was a kid. They used to put people in kind of awkward situations. I forget exactly, and they would film them, but they didn't know they were being filmed. They do this nowadays also, a little bit. But this was a whole TV, like big TV show. It's called Candid Camera, which means it was a hidden camera, and they set up some situation, like some whatever You've just been awarded the Nobel Prize and this and that, and they see how people react, So, you can think like that, when you're dealing with these challenges, you can think, Krishna's camera is watching. So, so Krishna, you're watching me, you want to see what I'm going to do now. I mean, I've had this, this past year I've had some experiences where I was being pulverized with lies and stories about me, which were 108% untrue. Fantastic stories. I mean, kind of things that Ritviks like to read, but completely, like, not even close. And so, I'm sitting in this situation, and this person is really angry with me. And I hadn't even spoken to the person in 2 years, and all of a sudden they're like, you're this, you're that. I'm like, what did I do? And then I was thinking of this quote by Bhaktisiddhanta, that you should only desire the greatest good for your worst enemies. And like, what a challenge that is. It's easy to talk about. I give a class. Yes, Prabhus. Yes, Mataji's. Somebody hates you. You should just pray for them. So easy to say. And I've said it so many times, because we say it in our forgiveness workshop. And then all of a sudden, I'm in it. Not with one person, not with 2 people, 3 people, all attacking at different times. And I'm sitting there thinking, the natural condition side is, well, I could destroy them. And I think, no, I'm a devotee. I probably wouldn't even do that before I was a devotee, but it's just that rajas comes up when people are lying about you or trying to, telling other people how bad you are, whatever. And I said, no. Our philosophy is you have to pray for them. That just be their well-wisher, that you hope that everything goes well for them. So I kept oscillating like that. This natural tendency to want to get back. And then the devotional tendency to pray. So it's a real challenge. And I knew Krishna's watching me. Okay, how are you going to react to this? What are you going to do? And I try my best to think of their welfare and try to help them. And we have to do it. And so I take it that way. Krishna just like, okay, let's see. And if I do it, then Krishna will say, yes, my man. And if I don't, Krishna will say, you're bogus. You teach these things and you don't do it. So it was good. I need a little break right now. But it was good. Yes, your question.
My question is, you're saying that, like, when we put ourselves in these situations, what if it's situations like our parents, where we have no choice but to be in that situation, or randomly a random person physically assaults us, or like something along that lines, then how is it that we put ourselves in that situation? Because that's a little toxic way of thinking. Way.
That question you'll have to answer, but there is an answer. There is an answer for that that's not going to make you feel really bad. Obviously, if you're a kid and your parents are mistreating you, you don't have much choice, or even the intelligence to know that you have a choice. So there's obviously a karmic thing. So we just have to go back to the past life. Okay, I was a bad parent, now they're doing the same thing. If there's any choice you have, a girl, and so this guy's abusing me, but but I saw the signs of it when I met him, and I still, then I have to blame myself. Not like beat myself up, but just say, okay, I should have seen it. Or I did see it, but I didn't act on it. That happens all the time. And it may be because we're generous people, we trust people, we give people the benefit of the doubt. But then, if something bad happens because we do that, maybe the lesson is, okay, I want to be generous, but I want to be careful. And if I see signs that show lack of trust or dishonesty or whatever, maybe I should not be so generous.
But how do we move through these things like in a way that are like constructive? Like if somebody, like a random person were to physically abuse us, or like if something with our parents, just saying that it's okay, it's just a karmatic thing, sort of a standpoint, or
you want to take it to a high level. This may be too high for most of us, but let's start here, and then maybe we can work our way down to something more real. This is actually an interesting discussion, because there's a lot of things that we should be doing that seem quite unrealistic for us, and this could be one of them. When something bad happens, I think I deserve it. No, I deserve worse. That's how the pure devotee thinks. For all my sins, I deserve worse. So if you can't deserve worse, then I deserve it. I must have done something to deserve it. Because we all have past piety and past sin, so it's not all good, it's not all bad. Of course, if some random person harasses you because you were walking down an alley at midnight, then you would obviously think, I shouldn't have done that. So maybe the cause of the karma was the alley at midnight. There was nothing in your past life. But if you can't see the cause, then usually we would think it must be some karmic thing. Like, why was this person here? Why was I here? Why did I meet them? Why did all these things transpire? I've told this story before. It's interesting. I cracked my hip once, and I was on crutches. I had an operation. I was on crutches for 6 weeks. And there was a series of events, of maybe like 6 things that happened that led up to my breaking my hip. And if any one of those events hadn't happened, I wouldn't have broken my hip. They had all 6 to be there. So when I tell the story, I tell the whole story, everything that happened. I needed this, therefore I went here, and then this happened, and then I had to get the money to pay for it, but I couldn't get the money on time, and then he wasn't going to sell it to me, so then this happened, and that, and he was supposed to call me, but he didn't call me at the right time, and I wasn't home, and there were like 6 events. And it's so interesting, because once I tell the story, you could see, yeah, if any one of those 6 events wasn't there, you wouldn't have broken your hip. So sometimes, karma's like that. It's just, all these things had to be there. You ever been in a situation like that? Like, all these things had to be there, maybe over a period of a few weeks. And you could have just removed one, and they wouldn't have had the problem. Right? So sometimes I think it's obvious. It's a karmic thing. Doesn't mean we did anything in this life. Could be another life. But we have another problem. We don't like to suffer. So you'll say, well, why is that a problem? Because we want to make everything here perfect, and we want an easy life. And I have bad news for you. If you want it easy and perfect, this is not the place for easy and perfect. Of course, we're trying to make our lives comfortable. Obviously, we're trying to avoid pain. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's limitations. And we're in this environment. I mean, this environment is insane. It's crazy. I don't know. I read somebody recently died. Well, a lot of people recently died. But there was one incident. It was very sad. Like, it was a sister or a brother, and they were young. It was just like super sad. And we read these things, and it's so depressing. But the problem is, we're in a world where this happens. And so, what I've come to understand, or what's helped me, is that when these things happen, I just say, I remind myself, this is the place I chose to come, and this is what happens here. And how can I complain about it? Because it's the nature of this place. And you can read about, like when you read about this in Bhagavad Gita, birth, old age, disease, and death, you read about it, but you're sitting in a comfortable chair and you're still alive and you're not sick, and you weren't just born last week. So you read about it, but it's totally out of context of your life, right? So you read about it and you get all philosophical. Yeah, and give your lecture. You know, we have to, you know, be very conscious that any moment we could die and this and that. But in reality, most of us aren't ready for it. So the reason that suffering is so difficult is because normally we just read about it or we read about it in the newspaper, but it's not happening to us. And when it finally happens to us, we're not so prepared for it. There's a really funny idea here. Like, let's say you're in a class or you're giving a class and you're talking about the miseries of material existence and how good it is because it detaches us and it's the nature of the world, and if there weren't miseries, we wouldn't want to go to Krishna, we wouldn't even be chanting Hare Krishna, but because we want peace and happiness, and there's so little of it in this world, the miseries become the source of our Krishna consciousness. And, you know, it all makes sense. Right? And we're all inspired by hearing that. It's good. We need to hear it. And then the next day some misery comes to us and we can't tolerate it. Isn't it? So there's this huge disconnect between what we understand and being able to actually adapt to it in real life. So we saved your seat. What's it? We saved your seat for you. Been sitting there every day, right? So we saved it for you. So what I've learned to do is when the misery actually happens in real life and it comes to you, that's the hard part. And so what I've learned to do is use that as a reminder. Like, we forget the world we live in. Now, if this one person wrote an amazing book, it was all about death and how we can't deal with death and how we're all in total denial of it. We push it away. It was a whole book on that one topic. Just a denial of reality. And so, you know, the fact is for a conditioned soul to live peacefully in this world, they have to have certain psychological mechanisms of denial. Otherwise, if the idea, you know, if you weren't a devotee, the devotee can deal with it better. But if you weren't a devotee and the awareness of death and suffering and were on the forefront of your mind, you would go crazy. You wouldn't be able to live. So that we have these denial mechanisms just to get it out of our mind. And then there's the Shastra trying to put it in the forefront. And then it comes, and that's why it's such a shock, because we kind of got it out of the way. Yeah, my mother's 55, but, you know, most people live to their 80, 75, so okay, won't have to think about that one for another 25 years. And then, 3 years later she has cancer and she's dying. Shock, we're not ready for it. Here in Mayapur, it was a really interesting conversation. 1975, here in Mayapur on a morning walk, when Prabhupada came back, he would go in his room and all the devotees who were on the morning walk would stay, and we would say, what did he say? That was, always, anyone who's with Prabhupada, you'd always say, what did he say? Because everything Prabhupada said was like amazing. They said, Prabhupada said there'll be a third world war. He predicted a third world war. Can you imagine? Tomorrow, someone like Prabhupada predicts the third world war. It'd be kind of scary, right? So you can hear this morning walk, and it's very interesting to hear. And so some of the devotees, the managers, are like getting concerned, like, what's going to happen? Do we move out, in some area that's not near any site where there would be a nuclear bomb dropping, like big cities and so forth? And Prabhupada sort of just laughed and he said, I'll put it in California English, dude, what's your problem? You're either going to die today or tomorrow, so just get over it. So he didn't say it like that, but That's basically what he said. He was laughing. He said, you think you're not going to die? He said, you're going to die. Whether you die now or you die in 10 years, you're going to die. What's your problem? Why are you so worried? So that's why I think when things come to the forefront, right? The disease comes, a friend turns against you, someone tries to cheat you, someone's criticizing you, like all these, your best friend stabs you in the back. I mean, what's worse than that? And it's like sometimes it's like you can't deal with it. You just want to disappear, right? And it's at that time we should think, Krishna is reminding me where I am. And I use that personally as an impetus to get more into Krishna consciousness, because that's where the real shelter is. That's where the real happiness is. And, you know, Prabhupada's solution often was not to solve the problem here, because a lot of the problems here you can't solve. Well, your friend stabbed you in the back. I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. I can talk to her, but the knife's already in your back, so you know, she can apologize, but you have a big wound there. And so Prabhupada, often in situations like that, it was kind of like, yeah, that's this world, but why don't you go back to Godhead? Because it's not going to happen there. Like, that's the solution. As let's say your weather was really cold here, right? Started snowing for the first time. Everyone would be walking around, oh my God, it's so cold. It's like, can you believe it? It's snowing. It's like, we wouldn't even be talking about Krishna. We'd be talking about snow. And I'd say, and all I would say is, Prabhu, if you don't like snow, just get on an airplane and fly to South India. It's nice and warm right now. You know, quit complaining. You know, so it's something like that. Yeah, you don't like it here, go back to Godhead. Quit complaining about it. So that was kind of Prabhupada's mood. You know, like, I have the solution, but I can't make the solution here. And even if I could make the solution here, there's limitations. I'm still going to get old and die. So it's not that Prabhupada didn't want us to live comfortably and peacefully. We're not saying that. But even when you do that, there's, you know, who knows? You know? I was supposed to come to Mayapur 2 years ago, and I slipped off a bike and tore my whatever here, and whatever here, and another thing here, and like 6 weeks on crutches. I wasn't expecting that to happen that day. In those 6 weeks, I wrote a book, which I was trying to write for the last year. So, you know, I'm like hard-hearted. Krishna was like, he like hits me hard sometimes. Yeah. But things like that happen all the time, isn't it? Yeah, you fell off your motorcycle. You weren't planning on that. So we can use it to our advantage. You say, okay, reminder, this is where I live, this happens. So we all are trying to avoid pain, obviously. That's natural. But it's not completely possible. Even in Hawaii, there's pain. You still get sick sometimes. And some of your friends may not be so nice. You may not get invited to that party. So, you know. And then you find the man of your dreams. You're so happy. And one day, you're out walking on a beautiful beach in Hawaii, and you see him. Unfortunately, he's walking with his arm around your best friend, and you're devastated. Isn't it? Has that ever happened to you? Or something similar? Yeah. It's the liability, you know, whenever, you know, you want to create the perfect situation, there's a liability of how much you'll suffer if it doesn't continue. I wish I could say something else. I wish the world wasn't so bad so I wouldn't have to say that. But I can say this, that if you're Krishna conscious, it's certainly a lot easier to deal with. That's for sure. Because you always have shelter in Kirtan, Japa, the Bhagavatam. I was once in a really miserable depressed situation. And it's a long story, but there's a good reason to be. Anyone who was in the situation would be pretty depressed. And so I was visiting India, and I was in the Calcutta temple for a few weeks. And so, I'd be feeling this like intense anxiety, something really bad happened. But then I go to class, and I completely transcended it. And then it was so funny, when class ended, I fell right back into it. And I saw that every day. I'd go right above it, and I was like, this class is amazing, it's so blissful. And it was like I didn't have a problem, and the class ended, and So that's how I think. When all these horrible things are going on, I think, but we have the holy name, we have the Sangha, we have the Bhagavatam, we have so many things like to help us get through it and help us be happy even when we shouldn't be happy. I'll give you another example. There was a time when the movement in the early days was being threatened by some forces outside, and Prabhupada was really worried about it. The movement was just taking fold, the roots were digging in, it was starting to expand, and this was a germ that could have destroyed it. And I was there in the temple where Prabhupada was, and I didn't know about it, and I couldn't tell because Prabhupada was just his blissful self all the time. And 10 years after that happened, I'm reading the Lilamrita, and it describes, in this year, in this temple where I was, Prabhupada was undergoing this and this, and he was very upset about it and concerned and so on. But you never saw it. Just giving class, blissful kirtan. So that's what we have, the value. And then, if a loved one dies, your recuperation time is probably 10 times faster than everyone else. And the intensity of the pain is probably 10 times less, or at least a few times less. And that is such a valuable gift that we have. That even something that difficult, deal with it much more easily. I lost my mother when I was 26. I was a devotee. So then I lost my father, and father-in-law, brother-in-law. So I imagine if I wasn't a devotee, it would be really difficult. But as a devotee, it's okay. They're moving on. My father died. He was 92, and for the last few years of his life, his body was breaking down. So one time, I took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, "How are you doing?" And my father said, "Can you kill me?" He said, "Why do you want to die?" He said, "I can't see, I can't walk, and I can't hear." Because he could barely see, he had a hearing aid, and he was in a wheelchair. So he said, "Look, I'm 92, had a long life, and just kill me." Right? So, probably 6 months after that, he actually left his body. And I'd spent days with him, reading Gita, chanting Hare Krishna. He was not conscious anymore. But, tulsi in his mouth, and Radha Kun water, and I put tulsi neck beads. So then when he left his body, I thought, wow, he's out of his misery, totally out of his misery. And what an auspicious passing. So I was happy. My sister took it differently. Because, your father, he's gone. But as a devotee, I took it differently. No, he's gone to a better position. So that's what we can be grateful for. That even though these miseries aren't going to go away, our ability to handle them, we've been blessed. Right? Yes? What a blessing. It's such a blessing. If you take it that way. Is that okay? It's kind of like I made you a very healthy sweet. It doesn't taste so good, but I tried to put some nice honey on top. just so you can, it's not so bad. I'm taking some medicine now. It is nasty, but it's really good medicine. You know why it's nasty? It's got cow dung in it.
Oh.
Yeah. And cow urine.
Very healthy.
It's not in a capsule, it's in powder. Yeah. And other nasty things. But it's good medicine. So you can put a little honey in it. So, so the world is what it is, but at least the honey is that we can deal with it better. Before I was a devotee, I used to think, don't become attached to anything because you're going to lose it. Once you lose it, you're going to suffer. It's like, so I was like this sadhu, detached. If everything's good, then the bad's going to come, and if you get attached, you're going to lose it and suffer. But it's true, isn't it? So you have a great life, millions of friends, millions of dollars, super healthy, incredible relationships. Boy, it's going to be hard for you to die, isn't it? Or when that lifelong partner of 60 years, who was your soulmate, goes, oh my God. Right? It's going to be hard. And Prabhupada's father told him, Prabhupada said, I don't want to really marry this woman. I don't really like her. Or I think he was already married. He wanted to get another wife. He said, I don't like her. And his father said, that's good. You'll see Krishna is attractive because you're not attracted to your wife. So for us, sometimes the not good is good and the good is not good. Right? Did you know that Bhaktisiddhanta said it's better to rent than own? Did any of you know that? He said because when you own, you get attached. So much of the good is not good, and so much of the bad is good for us. Right? If you see it that way and you learn from it. I know in my life, certain things I'm attached to are the areas of my life where I suffer the most. Like Krishna won't let me get attached to it. Because as soon as I do it, he's like, ah! And that's a lesson. See, you're so stupid that I have to make you suffer so you realize that you should. Because I know what he's doing. I know, yeah, I'm stupid. I shouldn't be attached. And anyway, the goal is to go back to Godhead, not peacefully live here. I mean, you can peacefully live here, but the goal is to go back to Godhead. Right? So anything that pushes you closer, even if it hurts, it's good. And anything that pushes you away from it, even if it's nice, is bad. You agree? Hard to accept, but yeah. It's not that good things will push you away from Krishna. But if something pushes you away from Krishna, no matter how good it is, it's not good. And if something pushes you closer to Krishna, no matter how bad it is, it's good. Even though we may not want it. Right? Yeah, because we're conditioned and we don't always think straight. We don't always have strength. And this one teacher said something interesting. He said, human beings, they don't learn until they make mistakes. That's how human beings learn, just by failing over and over. And that's why when people get older and they're speaking to young people, the young people think, wow, you're so wise. And the old person thinks, I'm not wise, I've made all the, everything I'm talking about, I've made the mistakes. That's why I can tell you. Don't do this, and if you do this, it's, how are you so smart? No, we made all the mistakes. We're just speaking experience. It's not like we understood this when we were 15. So that's how life is like that. Through mistakes, we become wise. Okay, I wanted to read something that's so interesting. Identifying our motives takes honesty and courage. We need to have a strong desire to change. Yeah, we talked about this, right? Identifying your motives, why you did something, takes honesty and courage. Because you have to admit, maybe your motives weren't pure. You know, a lot of times we do things because we're afraid. You know that? Right. If you ever lie, you know why you lied? You're afraid of something. You're afraid of some outcome that would come from telling the truth. Did you know that? So if you ever lie, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Not that you should lie, but what are you afraid of? We need to have a strong desire to change, but sometimes, despite our good intentions, the reason we do something may not be so evident. Here's the story. 2 stories, amazing. I remember working with a devotee in therapy who was addressing her critical nature. She recognized, so this is after they discussed, and she started to see her motives. She recognized how destructive it was to her spiritual progress, and she wanted to stop, but felt impelled to do it. She didn't know how to stop it. You know that situation? You know it's bad, but you can't stop. You ever been in that situation? I know this is wrong, and I keep doing it. Like, it's so sad, and we all fall into that. She finally came to understand that she found fault in others so she wouldn't have to get close to them. Interesting, right? This is very specific to her situation. Once she realized the secondary gain she derived from criticizing, she could address her fear of intimacy. In other words, she must have had some past bad experiences with people. And so when you have bad experiences, you don't want to get too close because you're afraid it's going to be a problem again. So, you can have relationships like this, but when they come like this, it's like, oh, it's a little too close. This is dangerous. So then you want to get it like this, so you criticize them, just so they'll move away from you. Interesting. Once she realized the secondary gain she derived from criticizing, she could address her fear of intimacy. Dismantling her underlying reason for fault-finding allowed her to give it up. So she finally understood why she was doing it. And then she had to resolve this problem from the past where she was obviously hurt in the relationship. And once she did that, she could give up her fault-finding. Life is weird, isn't it? Here's another weird story. And I have some weird stories for you also. Not life is weird, the mind is weird. Another devotee was finding fault with her friend. As she got more in touch with the reasons for her feelings, she discovered she was feeling guilty that she hadn't supported her friend during her crisis. Finding fault with her friend was her way to justify her lack of involvement in her friend's life. It must have been something like she found fault with her friend about doing things which made it difficult or impossible or unreasonable to support her. All the things that she was saying, it seems, were made up. They weren't true. Isn't that interesting? You're finding fault so you can justify your misbehavior towards that person. Should I read it again? It's kind of subtle. She discovered she was feeling guilty that she hadn't supported her friend during a crisis. Finding fault with her friend was her way to justify her lack of involvement in her friend's life. So that way she could overcome her guilt by blaming her friend for the fact that she wasn't supporting her. It also protected her self-image and her belief that she's caring and helpful. So I think we talked about this a little bit, right? Like to maintain your image, I can maintain my image if I blame you. But if I don't blame you, then my image is exposed and I can't maintain that false image. So her image was she is caring and helpful. But she wasn't caring and helpful in that situation, so she had to blame the other person. And that way she could still maintain her image that she's caring and helpful. Interesting, right? Have you ever done that? Blame somebody so you could maintain your image? In this case, the devotee was able to forgive herself for not being sympathetic and apologize to her friend. So the underlying cause or the motive was a bit hidden from her conscious awareness. So we may be finding fault for reasons that are hidden from our conscious awareness. So what she's saying here is to look for your motives. Try to go more deeply. Then I have another story. This is an amazing story. Oh, maybe I'll tell you next year. Vaisnava Aparadha. You're coming back next year? I was in New Vrindavan. I did a forgiveness workshop. And then I went to London and did it. And the same devotee was there that took the workshop. Well, it was in New Vrindavan, I think it was only an hour. And then in London, it was like 2 days. So at the end of the workshop, she still hadn't forgiven, which is pretty rare. Mostly everybody does. So I said, well, let's talk about it. And I couldn't figure it out. She had an issue with the ashram leader, Brahmacharini ashram. She had an issue. And she says, I can't deal with this person. She's just always finding fault with her. And then we were talking, after like 2 hours of trying to solve this, she mentioned something about her mother suffering because of her father's actions. And I said, I was like, a lawyer in court who thinks he's hit something. I think I hit something. So tell me. So she said her father, as I remember, they were from India, and her father spent most of his time in the UAE, maybe Dubai. And he made a lot of money, but he was never around. So he took care of the family. But she saw that her mother was always depressed and upset because her husband was never around. And he did everything with money. No time, no affection, nothing, just money. And then everything hit the head. She said, I feel like my mother, and I feel like the ashram leader is like my father. And it was like, then we understood. What a complicated thing. That's why you're finding fault, because your ashram leader realizes, makes you think of your mother. And she said, because I grew up watching my mother suffer. And I feel like my mother now. And the ashram leader is like my father. And I hated my father for doing that. And I hate the ashram leader. But it was all, it wasn't conscious. Interesting, right? So, if you can get more in touch with what the payoffs are and the motives are, and heal those, change the motives and heal the motives. Heal the motives. No. Heal the issues and purify the motives, then you're going to make a lot of progress. So, right now, think of someone you've criticized. And ask yourself, what was the motive, what was the payoff? Or what was, or any of these reasons here. What was I running away from, or whatever? And be honest. I think a lot of us, when we criticize people above us, it's frustration. We want our lives to be better, we want ISKCON to be better, and we're frustrated. And we're not doing much to make our lives better, ISKCON better. And we want them to make our lives better and ISKCON better. And we're frustrated with it. I think that's very common. You agree? Like, they should be like the genie making everything happen. Because authorities are a huge target of criticism. Very common. Anyone want to share what they discovered?
I can share.
Yeah.
It's not nothing devotional related. It's at my work.
Yes.
There's this. His name is Juan, and I always think that I have always think that he has like that. I don't know how to say it, like passion, because he wants to ascend and he wants to be a boss, and now he's a manager on some sort of some area, and I criticize him about it because he's like, why are you like that? Why aren't you just doing your job like good? He's always like speaking with people, so people to maintain the image that he has, and it's like now I'm thinking about it. It's like maybe I do that. Maybe I also do that.
You do the same thing.
You know, and maybe I should just think about. I am the one that has to change, not Juan.
Yeah. One may have to change, but you may not be the one to change him.
Exactly. That's it.
Juan is the one. Juan is the one to change him. But we said that yesterday. That when something bothers you, it's likely that you have it. Anyone else want to share? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to share.
I have someone. One is funny. I have a cousin. It's not exactly cousin. It's like a second cousin. I don't know how to say in English. Say like second cousin. Mm-hmm. His father was like quite crazy. He's the parent. His father is like the cousin of my father, but their parents live when he was 5 years old. So he went to live with my father. And the son of my uncle is very happy, and he has a lot of money and the company house is smiling like this, like that. And sometimes I criticize, because the little materialist, always happy, funny. And his mother died when he was alone. Her parents were always fighting. His father was completely a mess. So he has a very this background. It's so difficult. And he's very happy, You see it like this, has a very nice house, very nice family, always joking like this, has a very good company like this, How he could survive with this bad environment to really be happy in the material world and really enjoy the material world. And maybe I think like I had everything so nice like this, I'm always lamenting because like this, very Argentinian tango thing.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that you would like that you don't have, that another person has, can be a cause of criticism, for sure. You can just glorify somebody. Feels a lot better than criticizing. Now I know it's hard to do, because sometimes we want to pull them down, but you'll be much happier. I want to end now because we're going to do kirtan, but I wanted to just bring this to the point of fulfillment in our spiritual life, and I think one of the reasons we all can recognize that we're criticizing is we're not fulfilled in our spiritual life. Because if you're fulfilled, you're doing well, not only spiritually but materially, you're stable, you have what you need, you have a service you like, a job you like, you have stability in your ashram, you're doing well in your sadhana. If you have all that, the amount of criticism you do is just going to drop. Because when things are good for you, there's not a lot of impetus to criticize, isn't it? It's like you're happy. So happy people are the ones who criticize the least, isn't it? And unhappy people tend to criticize more. Have you noticed that? You know, think of a time in your life, in your spiritual life, when you were really satisfied, really, really blissful. Nice temple, nice service, nice devotees, everything nice. Probably your tendency to criticize would lower. And think of a time where you're not so well situated, probably your tendency to criticize was higher. So it's something to consider. Hare Krishna. So, you know, in one sense you can say the cure for criticism is just be happy in your spiritual life and be situated well in your material life. Because if you're happy, another person's happiness is not going to bother you, but if you're not happy, their happiness bothers you. Why are you so happy? Don't be happy. You bother, isn't it? You're not allowed to be happy because until I'm happy, you're not allowed because your happiness bothers me. Right? Yes?
Why is it hard to be honest, like in finding those hidden motives, tracing the truth?
You have to come to my retreat to find out. Because we're going to talk about it. But
I mean, this retreat is just coming now.
yeah. We're going to do a lot of this, like understanding why we do what we do. But one of the primary reasons is we all have an image of ourselves. And if reality presents a different image, we'll try to focus out that reality because it's really hard to admit or to bear. Yeah. Yeah. It's not just Krishna conscious philosophy, psychologists say it also. You know, defending ego. And that's why if you have a certain image and someone criticizes you in a way that destroys that image, that's when you get the most upset and the most defensive, isn't it? If we become more humble, then the image is less of a problem. And if you become more humble, then it's easier to acknowledge your mistakes, defects, etc. Because as we said a few days ago, you're no longer trying to protect, you're no longer trying to project an image. So there, you know, if I point out a fault, because you're not projecting an image, you're trying to maintain an image, there's no image that you perceive I'm exposing, because you don't have an image that you're maintaining to be exposed. But when you're maintaining an image, then it's hard to be criticized because the image is exposed. Or a different image is exposed. And the real image is, you realize it's not the real image. And that's hard. And that's why it's hard to be honest with ourselves, to admit I'm actually like this or that. And as we were talking previously about self-acceptance, if you dare to be honest with yourself, it has to be accompanied with self-acceptance, otherwise you'll destroy yourself. Because like, look how, I finally got honest, look how bad I am, what's the use? I'm leaving Krishna consciousness, I'm so bad. So it has to be self-acceptance. No, I'm just being real about where I am, and it's not a judgment. It's just, this is how it is. So if you can avoid the judgment, the negative judgment, you're okay. The other thing is, if you are a certain way, what value is there in pretending you're not?
Once again,
If my IQ is 80 and I pretend it's 185, what's the value? It's better I just acknowledge it's 80 and I'm not, going to go for a PhD or anything. So,
in focusing and trying to find actually where your talents are.
yeah. So if this is who I am, what's the value of pretending I'm someone else? So here's a problem. We want people to think we're good devotees, or we're Krishna conscious. There's a bit of pressure, subtle pressure. And also we don't want to let people down, we don't want to disappoint them, we don't want to be a bad example. So sometimes there's a lot of pressure on us to fake it, and to fake it to ourselves. But one thing you'll notice is as you advance, you'll be able to be much more real about where you're at, rather than pretentious. Because a lot of times we pretend to be something we're not, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, which makes it quite delusional. So all I can say to all of you is, calm down, get real, don't spend your energy on pretending to be something you're not. It's not part of Vaishnavism. Prabhupada talks about pretension a lot. I'm on this level, but when I go out in the world, I pretend to everybody I'm on this level. That's kind of cheating. Such great music we get. I'm going to fly back here every year at this time just to hear this.
Indian trance.
I think this music lowers IQ. If I were younger, I'd do a PhD on music like this and study the effects. I think lowers IQ. It misaligns the chakras. Immediately transports one in the mode of ignorance and dulls the brain in so many ways. That's my theory.
Image with the true, just also just in some way, because if not
to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's going to make it was going to. They are making me whole. And I can't live without. Also live in a community, 10 houses, something like this,
Yeah, right. Okay.
It was like, wow, I had to go to speak one by one, be a nice behavior like during some months and like this, like that, just in a fake way, little, because devotees, we are human. Everybody need this, and the other one are afraid of you, and they're going to say that to this, and this is terrible because you have to go to live to another temple. Or, this is real,
Politics.
No, it's just cleaning your image. Sometimes you have to do like this.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we're not advanced, but I need this affection.
No, I understand. Yeah, it's for your spiritual benefit. That's different.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay, so we can end now. Anybody have anything else to say or ask? Okay. Almost. Yeah.
I just have an idea. You said once, fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
So isn't it contradictory?
So faking it doesn't mean your motives are not pure. Faking it doesn't mean you're pretentious. The idea of fake it till you make it means that before you're able to do something because of your qualification. You have to practice doing it. So practice is a bit fake because it's not that you've reached the goal. You're just practicing. But practice makes perfect. So fake it till you make it really means practice makes perfect. So don't be afraid to act properly by saying I'm not on that level. But okay, practice humility. Say, but I'm not humble. Well, that's why you should practice humility, because you're not humble. So, but I shouldn't fake it. No, you should because you haven't made it. You need to fake it because it's the way you get there. And you can do experiments, but I've done them, and just by acting in a certain way changes how you think. Like bodily posture changes how you think. So you want, let's do something fun. Smile and look up. Go like this. Big smile and look up. Everybody do that, okay? Okay, keep smiling and look up. Okay. How do you feel? Depressed or happy? Yeah. So that's kind of a fake it till you make it type thing. And like Prabhupada said, dance even if you don't want to. So there's certain things you do that just by doing them will change your consciousness. Funny, huh? If you're depressed, just smile. You'll feel better. It's true. Okay. Our Rajanga player's here. We're ready to rock. Hare Krishna.